I thought the worst thing was catching my husband. I was wrong. The worst thing is catching him in a sacred place, realizing I am not just fighting him, but fighting God, or at least the version they preach. They say the truth sets you free. In my community, the truth is just what burns you alive first. My name is Eliza Vance. I am 38 years old, and my world is built on data. As a senior risk analyst at Synthex Analytics, a private fintech firm, I do not deal in emotions. I deal in probabilities. I quantify risk. I identify threats before they materialize. I live in Brentwood, Tennessee, in a house where the lines are clean and the outcomes are predictable. My husband, Marcus, is the opposite. He works in real estate development for Holt Development, a name that carries the weight of old Nashville money and unspoken power. He is all charm and charisma, the warmth to my logic, the handshake to my spreadsheet. I thought we balanced each other. I was wrong. Sunday morning at Redemption Hill Community Church is not just a service. It is a networking event with hymns. It is a mega church where the elite of Nashville come to be seen, absolved, and affirmed, often in that order. The light filtering through the massive, modern stained glass windows is worth more than my annual salary. The sound system is concert grade. I hate it here. I was late. A data breach crisis at work had kept me on a secure line for 2 hours past the opening hymn, a cascade of encrypted files threatening a major client. When I finally slipped through the heavy oak doors, the organ was swelling to a crescendo. The air was thick with expensive perfume and the murmur of responsive reading. I scanned the pews for Marcus. He was supposed to save me a seat, and there he was. He was not in our usual spot, halfway back on the aisle. He was in the front row. The front row is reserved for the truly devout, the major donors, the inner circle of Pastor Thomas. He was not alone. He was holding hands with Seraphina Croft. Seraphina, the church's darling. A young widow whose tragic story a husband lost too soon was matched only by her profound piety and tireless, photogenic charity work. She was the picture of beatific grace, always dressed in tasteful white or cream. And my husband, Marcus, was holding her hand, their fingers interlaced, resting on the velvet-cushioned pew between them. It was not a gesture of comfort. It was one of quiet, established possession. The music softened. The pastor began to speak about the sanctity of the covenant. I did not hear him. I only heard the blood rushing in my ears, a high-frequency statistical anomaly. I saw the light from the window hit the 2-carat diamond on my left hand, and then the plain gold band on his, just inches from her pale, slender fingers. I processed the variables: the front row location, the public nature of the contact, the timing. This was not a mistake. It was a statement. I started walking. I left the plush-carpeted aisle and stepped onto the cold marble of the chancel steps. My heels clicked. 1, then 2. The sound was a sharp, percussive violation in the sacred quiet. The pastor's voice trailed off. The congregation, hundreds of them, turned. The sea of familiar Brentwood faces, bankers, lawyers, society wives looked at me, their expressions shifting from polite confusion to a dawning, hungry curiosity. I reached the front row. I stopped. I did not look at Seraphina. I looked at Marcus. His eyes met mine for a single, crystallized second. There was no panic. There was no flush of guilt. He simply closed his eyes, tilting his head back slightly, as if he were deep in prayer, inconvenienced by my interruption. I did not speak. I did not scream. I am a risk analyst. I assess. I looked down, focusing all my attention, all the compressed energy of that silent, staring sanctuary onto their joined hands. The silence stretched, louder than the organ, tighter than a drum. It was Marcus who flinched first. He snatched his hand back, the movement too fast, too guilty. He finally had the decency to look ashamed, his eyes dropping to the hymnal in his lap. But Seraphina did not. She slowly turned her head and looked up at me. There was no embarrassment in her gaze. There was no fear. There was only pity, a profound, condescending pity, as if I were the one who had erred, a lost soul needing guidance. Her voice, when she spoke, was soft, like fine silk, but it carried with absolute precision through the acoustically perfect hall. "Eliza," she said. It sounded like a blessing, or a diagnosis. "He confessed to me. He has fallen, but God forgives him." The words hung in the air, a perfectly executed maneuver. The pastor cleared his throat, ready to seize the narrative. I understood immediately. This was not an apology, it was a coup. The implication was devastatingly clear, delivered with the force of a judgment. God had forgiven him. Seraphina, in her infinite grace, had forgiven him. The sin was processed, packaged, and absolved before I even knew it existed. Now, it was my turn. And if I failed to forgive, if I made a scene, if I rejected this sacred narrative of redemption, I would not be the victim. I would be the final sinner, the one refusing God's work. I did not turn back. I did not run. I walked out of the heavy oak doors of Redemption Hill, my steps measured, my spine rigid. The collective gasp of the congregation followed me out into the humid Tennessee sunlight, but I felt nothing. There was no rage, no hot tears, just a cold, sharp clarity. The emotional response system had shut down, the analyst had taken over. I did not drive home to Brentwood. Home was compromised. It was no longer a secure location. I drove downtown, to the empty reflective glass tower of Synthex Analytics. My credentials got me past the night security and up to the 21st floor. My office was dark, quiet, and temperature-controlled. Here, there were no judgmental eyes, only data streams. I sat in my ergonomic chair, the skyline of Nashville a grid of indifferent lights. I did not weep. I worked. I opened my terminal. Marcus and I had joint finances, a decision he had insisted upon for transparency. It was his first mistake. My access was administrator level. I pulled up every shared account checking, savings, our brokerage portfolio, the home equity line of credit, and 3 joint credit cards. I did not move money. Moving money is rash. Moving money leaves a trail for lawyers to follow. I began a forensic audit. It took less than 5 minutes to find the first anomaly. The joint American Express card, the one we used for household expenses. Marcus had been making charitable donations, large ones. $10,000 here, $15,000 there, totaling over $80,000 in the last quarter alone. My stomach did not churn. My focus narrowed. I cross-referenced the recipient identification numbers. The money was not going to Redemption Hill. It was not going to any recognized nonprofit. It was being funneled, cleanly and consistently, to a private foundation I had never heard of, the Croft Reconstruction Fund. I see. Reconstruction. My fingers moved across the keyboard. It was a surgical procedure. Password change, joint banking. New password alphanumeric, 24 characters, irretrievable. Password change investment portfolio. Password change Netflix. Amazon Prime. The HBO login. Password change. The smart home system. The thermostat. The garage door. The automated irrigation system. If he wanted to water the lawn, he would have to call a landscaper. Next, the family server. A high-capacity network-attached storage drive stored in my home office. Marcus, in his typical lazy fashion, used it to back up his personal laptop, which included sensitive files from Holt Development he was not supposed to take off-site. His second mistake, I initiated a remote lockdown. Access denied. With administrator privileges, I ran a deep scan of his backup directory. Most of it was boring blueprints, contracts, expense reports. Then I found the personal admin folder. 6 months ago, Marcus had opened a new life insurance policy, a $2 million term life policy. On me. He had forged my signature for the medical release. The primary beneficiary was not him. It was Seraphina Croft. The air in my office felt suddenly too cold. This was no longer adultery. This was plotting. This was malice. I downloaded the policy. I downloaded everything. I mirrored the entire server, every kilobyte of data, onto a new, military-grade encrypted external hard drive. The one I used for clients who thought the Securities and Exchange Commission was spying on them. The backup finished. I was about to log off when a hidden directory caught my eye. The file name was innocuous, Vacation Planning. It was not vacation planning. Inside were high-resolution scans of 2 passports, Marcus Vance and Seraphina Croft. Beside them was a text file. It was not a list of hotels. It was a list of web browser search queries, cached from his laptop. Countries with no extradition treaty: U.S. Easiest citizenship for American investors. Moving assets to Cayman Islands undetected. Tennessee state law statute of limitations embezzlement. He was not just having an affair. He was not just stealing. He was planning to vanish. He was planning an exit strategy that left me with nothing, and Seraphina with everything. I unplugged the hard drive. I finally allowed myself one single emotion. Not sadness, not betrayal, contempt. He was sloppy. And he was about to find out what happens when a sloppy variable meets a dedicated analyst. The calls started Monday morning. It was not my family. They were back in Ohio, blessedly unaware. It was my church family, the community from Redemption Hill, and they were mobilizing. The wall of feigned piety was closing in. The first call was from Bethany, the pastor's wife. Her voice was syrupy with concern. "Eliza, honey," she began, "Pastor Thomas and I are just heartbroken over this. We want to schedule a marriage counseling session for you and Marcus. We must remember the sanctity of the vow you took before God." I pictured the vow, the church, the white dress. I pictured Marcus holding Seraphina's hand in that same sanctuary. "Thank you, Bethany," I said, my voice flat. "I'm not available for counseling. I'm auditing." I hung up before she could respond. Next, a text message. A long, scrolling paragraph from a woman in my former prayer group. She wrote that she understood my earthly pain, but I needed to see the divine picture. Seraphina, she insisted, had a special ministry for helping lost souls. Marcus was clearly just one of those souls, and I should be grateful Seraphina was there to guide him back to the light. I was, she implied, getting in the way of his salvation. The digital shunning was followed by the physical one. When I drove back to the Brentwood house to pick up the encrypted hard drive, my neighbor, the one I'd carpooled with to a church bake sale just last month, saw me, pretended to check her mail, and hurried back inside, her garage door sliding shut. Marcus still had not come home. I knew he was with her. He was at Seraphina's, cementing his role as the repentant victim, the fallen man she was bravely nursing back to spiritual health. He would be telling her how cold I was, how unfeeling, how my analytical mind never understood his needs. He would be correct. I did not understand. But I was learning. The final blow came as an email directly from Pastor Thomas. It was titled, "A Path to Forgiveness." He quoted scripture, chapter and verse, all centered on the duty to forgive, the sin of holding a grudge, the parable of the prodigal son. He then pivoted, his tone turning pastoral but sharp. He said he had heard of the precipitous actions I had taken regarding my shared earthly possessions. He advised that such vengeful, unchristlike behavior would only harden Marcus's heart and, more importantly, damage my own testimony. He was threatening me with my own soul. They were all in on it. The entire infrastructure of the church was designed to protect the sinner and silence the sinned against. I was reading the pastor's email for the third time, dissecting the language, when my phone rang again. A number I did not recognize, but I knew the area code. It was Marcus's mother. I braced myself for an onslaught of defense, a mother protecting her son. I was wrong. "Eliza." Her voice was not strong. It was thin, high-pitched, and trembling with a raw panic that cut through the phone. "Hello, Catherine," I said. He did it again. Didn't he? The question stopped me cold. It was not an inquiry. It was an accusation, but not aimed at me. What did you say? I knew it. I knew it when he started talking about that woman, that widow. She was rambling, on the verge of hysteria. He said she was just a friend from church who needed help. Catherine, what do you mean? He did it again. She was sobbing now. His girlfriend, in college, not the one you met, the one before, a sweet girl. He was cheating, and she found out. She was going to tell everyone. Oh, God. He ruined her. He took all her money. He had access to her student loan accounts. He emptied them, wiped her out. She had to drop out of school. He told everyone she was unstable, that she'd lied about him, and he'd just been trying to protect her from herself. The line went quiet as she cried. I looked at the encrypted hard drive on my desk, the life insurance policy, the extradition searches, the Croft Reconstruction Fund. My perception of the entire event shifted, recalibrating with this new, terrifying data point. Marcus was not a fool who had fallen for a pious con artist. He was not a weak man seeking redemption. He was a systematic predator, and this was his pattern. I was not the scorned wife. I was the next victim in a series. Serafina was not his savior. She was his accomplice. The church was not a neutral party. It was his cover, his weaponized alibi. Thank you, Catherine, I said, my voice steady. You have been more helpful than you know. I hung up. I put my phone on silent. I picked up my car keys. I did not drive to a therapist. I did not drive to my own pastor. I drove to the most expensive law firm in Nashville. I walked into the lobby, past the polished mahogany and old oil paintings, and asked to see the senior partner in corporate formation. I was not there to file for divorce. I was there to incorporate. I need to establish a new limited liability company, I told the lawyer, under my maiden name, effective immediately. Marcus finally showed up on Tuesday night. He did not call. He did not text. I knew he was there because the smart doorbell, which was now linked only to my phone, chimed. I watched the high-definition feed. He stood on the porch, jabbing his key into the lock, twisting it with increasing violence. He rattled the handle. Finally, defeated, he jabbed the doorbell. I let him wait. I watched him pace the porch, running his hands through his hair. He was a man locked out of his own life. He buzzed again, longer this time. I made a fresh cup of coffee, black. After a full 5 minutes, I walked to the door, coffee mug in hand, and opened it. He looked terrible. His suit was rumpled, his eyes were bloodshot, and he smelled faintly of Serafina's floral perfume. He tried to push past me, but I did not move. What the hell, Eliza? My key does not work. My phone cannot access the bank. I cannot even open my work files on my laptop. What did you do? He barged in, not waiting for an invitation. He was not remorseful. He was furious. This was not the posture of a repentant sinner. It was the entitlement of a man whose access had been revoked. You are destroying everything, he shouted, throwing his useless keys onto the marble entryway table. Our lives. My job. You are acting like a spoiled child. I took a slow sip of my coffee. I remained standing by the door. No, Marcus. You already destroyed everything. I am just assessing the damage. My calmness seemed to enrage him further. He paced the hall, his voice echoing in the quiet, sterile house. This is insane. I made a mistake. I am a man. I fell. I told you. I told everyone. I confessed. He stopped pacing and turned to face me, adopting the sanctimonious tone he must have rehearsed with Serafina. He softened his voice, as if speaking to someone irrational. I confessed. Eliza. I have been forgiven. Serafina. She has guided me back to the light. She has shown me what true grace is. I have changed. Why can you not accept that I have changed? A sound escaped my lips. It was not a sob. It was a laugh, dry and sharp as flaked rust. It was the most emotion I had shown in 2 days, and it made him recoil. "You have not changed, Marcus. You just changed audiences. You are sloppy. You always have been." I set the coffee mug down. "You think I do not know about the Croft Reconstruction Fund?" The color drained from his face, the righteous anger, the feigned piety. It all evaporated in an instant. His charm was a weapon, but I had just brought an arsenal. He stared at me, truly seeing me for the first time. Not his wife, not his partner, his analyst. He realized, in that cold, silent moment, that this was not a domestic dispute. It was a hostage negotiation, and he was not the one holding the gun. "What? What are you talking about?" he stammered. "No more games. Marcus, here is the offer," I said, my voice as level as a balance sheet. "I want a divorce, an uncontested, rapid, quiet divorce. You will sign whatever I put in front of you. I keep this house. I keep my own pension and investments. I will take 70% of all joint liquid assets. You will walk away with your car, your clothes, and your 30%. You will disappear from my life. That is the deal." He scoffed, a pathetic attempt to regain control. "You are insane. No judge in Tennessee will give you that. You cannot prove anything. Adultery. That is not enough for 70%. "I am not talking about adultery," I said. I picked up my coffee. "You will agree to my terms, because if you do not, if you fight me, if you delay, if you so much as raise your voice to me again—" I let the silence hang, then delivered the variable that would break his entire model. "I will send my full detailed audit of your fund directly to your boss, Arthur Holt. I will send him the wire transfer records. I will send him the invoices. I am sure he will be fascinated to learn that his top development manager is approving massive, unbudgeted overages for subcontractors. Subcontractors who just happen to be shell companies funneling money directly back to the Croft Reconstruction Fund on Holt development projects." Marcus turned a shade of gray I had previously only seen on concrete. "You are done," I said, finishing my coffee. "The only question is whether you walk away with 30% or in handcuffs." Marcus capitulated. He sat at our kitchen island, the one I had picked out, and verbally agreed to every term. He would sign the papers. He would move out. He would take his 30%. But his eyes were shifty. He was too agreeable, too defeated. A cornered animal does not just surrender. It looks for another way out. I knew he was lying. He was not beaten. He was stalling. He would be using this time to cover his tracks, to move assets, to orchestrate another disappearance. My deal had only bought me a few days. He left. The door clicked shut, and the house was finally mine. I went back to my home office, not to relax, but to pivot. The threat was no longer internal, it was external. My audit was not finished, it had just expanded. I focused on the Croft Reconstruction Fund. My LLC was now active, giving me a corporate shield. I used my Synthex-level access to professional-grade databases, the ones that cost corporations tens of thousands of dollars a year. I ran a full background check and entity trace. The fund was registered 6 months ago. The sole incorporator and president, Julian Croft. A quick cross-reference confirmed the relationship. He was Seraphina's older brother, Julian Croft. The name meant nothing to me, but the data told a story. He was a small-time general contractor. His business, Croft Builders, had filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection just 8 months prior, citing nearly $500,000 in debt. He was, on paper, insolvent. Yet, 6 months ago, something changed. His bankruptcy was abruptly settled, and Croft Builders, a company with no reputation and a recent history of failure, suddenly started receiving contracts, very specific contracts. I pulled the public permit filings for Holt Development's newest flagship project, the massive luxury condominium complex Marcus was managing in the Gulch. I cross-referenced the subcontractors. There it was, Croft Builders. They had been awarded the exclusive multi-million-dollar contracts for framing, drywall, and interior finishing. All three were signed off by the project head, Marcus Vance. The pattern materialized, as clean and undeniable as a statistical model. One Marcus, from his powerful position inside Holt. Awards inflated, no bid contracts to a bankrupt company run by his mistress's brother. 2 Julian Croft, suddenly solvent, overbills for materials and labor, creating massive fraudulent profits. 3. To clean the money, Julian donates a huge portion of those profits back to his own charity, the Croft Reconstruction Fund. 4. Marcus and Serafina, as undeclared operators of the fund, can then draw on that money, tax-free, under the guise of charitable expenses, or salaries. It was a brilliant, self-contained money laundering loop, all of it hidden behind the holy trinity of Nashville property development, high society charity, and the blessing of the church. My breath caught. Serafina. She was not just the other woman. She was not a pious fool he had manipulated. She was the architect, or, at the very least, a willing and core partner. Her soft voice in the church, "God forgives him," echoed in my mind. It was not an absolution. It was a taunt. It was the boast of a co-conspirator who believed she was untouchable. I had enough to destroy Marcus in civil court. But this was a criminal enterprise. And they were sloppy. I picked up my phone and made a call, not to a lawyer, but to an investigative journalist, a man my firm keeps on retainer for high-stakes due diligence, someone who lives to tear down facades. "David," I said, "I have a story for you, a fintech story. It involves public corruption, money laundering, and one of Nashville's biggest development firms. I am sending you a secure file." After I sent the encrypted data, I made another call, this time to the main office of Redemption Hill Community Church. "Yes, hello," I said, my voice pitched with just the right amount of polite interest. "Could you please connect me to Serafina Croft? I am Eliza Vance. I was so moved by her work. I would love to meet with her. I am interested in learning more about the wonderful charity she is doing." They scheduled a lunch for the following day. I was prepping my questions for Serafina, outlining the conversation like a deposition, when my phone rang. It was Catherine, Marcus's mother. She was crying again, but this time, the hysteria was gone. It was replaced by a cold, terrible fear. "Eliza," she whispered, I do not know if I should say this, but be careful with that woman, with Serafina." "What do you mean, Catherine?" "The last time," she said, her voice cracking. "The girl in college, the one he ruined, after it was all over, after she lost everything, she had an accident." "An accident?" "A car accident," Catherine whispered. "Her brakes failed. She hit a tree. She lived, but she never spoke up again." We met at an upscale restaurant in Green Hills, a place defined by hushed tones and expensive, minimalist salads. Serafina was already seated at a table by the window, a picture of serene grace, dressed in an elegant white linen dress. She looked, as she always did, like a woman untouched by the messiness of the world. She stood as I approached, her smile gentle, almost beatific. "Eliza," she said, her voice a soft coo. She leaned in, not for a hug, but for a confidential whisper, her signature move. "Thank you so much for coming. I am so glad you reached out. I have been praying for you constantly. This must be a time of such profound pain." The waitress came. I ordered an unsweetened iced tea. Serafina, naturally, ordered only hot water with a slice of lemon. She placed her pale, manicured hands on the crisp white tablecloth. "I know your heart is hardened right now," she began, her voice dripping with the empathy she had perfected. "But you must know, Marcus is a good man. His heart is truly turning back to God. It is a beautiful, powerful thing to witness. Is it? I asked. I took a sip of my tea. The glass was cold, grounding. I am actually here because I was so moved by your work, your charity, the Croft Reconstruction Fund. Her smile remained, but it became a fixed, brittle thing. The light in her eyes dimmed almost imperceptibly. Oh, she said. Well, it is the Lord's work. We have just been so blessed. You certainly have, I said, my tone matching her polite public voice. I was looking at the public filings this morning. It is incredibly impressive how quickly the fund has grown, especially with such generous support from some of Holt Development's key subcontractors. That must be a huge relief, given your brother Julian's recent financial troubles. Her smile did not just freeze, it fractured. She stared at me, her blue eyes turning to ice. The performance was over. God has been generous, she said, her voice flat. His grace is abundant. I leaned forward, dropping my voice to the same intimate level she had used. Was it God, Serafina, or was it Marcus? Because I am just a simple risk analyst. But when I look at the public records, I see a fascinating correlation. The donations from those subcontractors, they correspond precisely, down to the dollar, with the material cost overruns that Marcus approved on the Gulch project. What a divine coincidence. God's grace, I suppose, lines up perfectly with accounting fraud. Her hand trembled. She knocked her fork and it clattered loudly on her bread plate. The sound was jarring in the quiet room. Her mask of piety did not just slip. I had ripped it from her face. The saint was gone. A cold, furious calculator sat in her place. You think you are so smart, do you not? She hissed, her voice no longer soft, but a venomous rattle. With your spreadsheets and your data, you think you have figured something out. I think I have, I said calmly. You have figured out nothing, she spat, leaning across the table, her face inches from mine. You want to know the truth. Marcus is sick of you. He is sick of living with a walking computer, an emotionless shell. He wanted a real woman, a woman who would support him, believe in him, inspire him, not just audit him. I allowed myself a small, cold smile. And instead, he found a thief, a perfect match. I expected rage. I expected denial. What I got was a laugh. Serafina threw her head back and laughed, a sharp, ugly sound that made the nearby tables turn. Oh, you are a fool, she said, wiping a non-existent tear from her eye. You really do not get it, do you? You think this is about Holt's money? She shook her head, still chuckling. How naive. This is not about Holt Development's money. Eliza, this is about Marcus's money. I waited. The new data did not compute. She saw my confusion and her smile widened, full of genuine, cruel pleasure. He has been skimming from Holt for years, long before I ever met him. Little bits, here and there. A percentage off a land deal, a kickback from a vendor. He is not a fool. Eliza, he is a brilliant operator. He has millions tucked away that Holt knows nothing about. She leaned in again, her eyes gleaming. Julian, my brother is a pathetic, greedy leech. He found out. He found one of Marcus's old ledgers. He has been blackmailing Marcus for the last year. That is what this is about. That is what he has over him. The pieces rearranged themselves in my head with sickening speed. The fund, she continued, her voice now triumphant, is not a money laundering scheme. It is an extortion payment. It is the blood money Marcus has been paying Julian, month after month, just to keep him silent. And I am sick of it. I am sick of my brother, and I am sick of Marcus being too weak to handle him. She reached across the table, her hand stopping just short of touching mine. That is why Marcus came to me. He needed help to get rid of Julian, and I am tired of being controlled by both of them. So I decided to help Marcus, so he and I can finally be free. I was stunned. My entire analysis was built on a flawed premise. I had assumed Marcus and Serafina were partners in a simple, greedy scheme to defraud Holt Development. I had calculated their risk, their payout, their methodology. I was wrong. This was not a partnership. It was a chaotic triangle of predation. Marcus was the original embezzler, Julian was the blackmailer, and Serafina was the opportunistic parasite, trying to steer the sinking ship toward her own shore. I had been so focused on the money laundering from Holt that I missed the extortion of Marcus. Serafina was watching me, her eyes sharp, waiting for my response to her shocking confession. She saw my shock and mistook it for weakness. "You see, Eliza," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Julian is a snake. He is destroying me, and he is destroying Marcus. He is too weak to deal with him. He is paralyzed by the threat. But you," she leaned in, her gaze intense. "You are strong. I saw it in the church. You are like him, like Julian. You are ruthless. He is terrified of you." It was the most backhanded compliment I had ever received. "He wants to give you what you want," she continued. "The divorce, the money, but he cannot. Julian has him on a leash. Help us. Help me. Help me get rid of Julian, neutralize his threat, and I will make sure Marcus signs anything you want. We can all get what we want. He and I can leave, and you can have your clean, empty, logical life." I held her gaze. I processed the new variables. An alliance. "How?" I asked, my voice flat. "What leverage does he have, specifically?" "A ledger," Serafina said, bitterness twisting her pretty features. "A stupid, old-fashioned, handwritten book. He is not smart enough for digital. He keeps it in his office safe, at the construction site. It details every single payment Marcus ever skimmed, every contract he ever inflated. It is his insurance policy." "He keeps a physical record of extortion on site," I said, unable to hide my contempt for their collective stupidity. "He is arrogant," she countered. "He thinks no one would ever dare." I nodded slowly, as if considering her offer. "Let me think about it. I need to reevaluate the risk." I paid for the lunch. Serafina squeezed my hand as we left. "You will do the right thing, Eliza. I know you will. God will guide you." I pulled my hand away. I did not need God's guidance. I had a terminal. I went back to my home office. An alliance Serafina was just as desperate as Marcus, and just as dangerous. She had offered me a choice her side, or Julian's. It was a fatal miscalculation on her part. I did not have to choose. I could destroy all three of them. The construction site, Julian's office. Holt Development had, of course, installed the security for their own multi-million-dollar project. The keycards, the cameras, the servers. It was all Holt property. And thanks to Marcus's sloppy habit of backing up his entire work life, I still had administrator-level access to the Holt security mainframe. His third and final mistake. I bypassed the firewall in under 60 seconds. I had live feeds from 24 cameras. Julian's office was on the third floor of the site trailer. I remotely accessed the office's local server. He was arrogant, but not a complete fool. He had scanned the ledger. It was there, in a password-protected file. It took me 12 minutes to brute force the password. It was Serafina. I opened the file. It was worse than I could have imagined. Page after page of meticulous, handwritten entries, dates, wire transfer codes, amounts. It was not just Marcus. The kickbacks involved payoffs to a sitting city council member, ensuring Holt's projects were fast-tracked through zoning and permitting. This was not just embezzlement. This was a deep-rooted public corruption scandal. I downloaded the scans to my encrypted drive. As the file transferred, I noticed another item in the directory, a single, small, encrypted email file. It was not a scan. It looked like Marcus had saved it there directly. My security protocols were better than his. I ran my decryption keys. The email was from Marcus's personal account, sent to Seraphina's just 2 days ago, after our confrontation at the house. The message was short. Julian is getting too greedy. He knows you are working with me. He will not stop. After E signs the papers on Friday, we'll handle them both. The brake line accident seems most effective for both. It worked once. A chill, colder than any I had ever felt, settled in my bones. E, that was me. Both. That was me and Julian. He was not just planning to escape. He was planning to kill me. The email was a pivot point. The threat was no longer financial. It was existential. The reference, "it worked once," screamed Catherine's story, the girl in college. The brake line accident. This was not a plan. It was a repeat performance. Marcus was not just a predator. He was a potential murderer. And I was next. My hands did not shake. My analysis simply shifted to a new, more critical variable: survival. This was bigger than a divorce. This was bigger than embezzlement. This was now a matter of public corruption and conspiracy to commit murder. I picked up my phone. I did not call the police. The police would want proof. They would ask questions. It would be messy, and a man like Marcus could talk his way around it. I needed to go to the only person who had more power than Marcus: the church and the city council combined. I called the private line of Arthur Holt. His assistant, a woman who had been with him for 30 years, answered. "Mr. Holt's office. This is Eliza Vance, senior risk analyst at Synthex Analytics," I said, my voice clear and professional. "I have uncovered a significant, time-sensitive financial liability within Holt Development. It involves public corruption and a direct threat to your assets. I need 30 minutes with Mr. Holt, privately, today." I was not the scorned wife. I was a professional consultant. The assistant, hearing the authority in my voice, put me on hold for less than 10 seconds. "The Cumberland Club, 6 p.m. Do not be late." The Cumberland Club was where old Nashville made deals over whiskey and steak. It was all dark wood, leather, and silence. Arthur Holt was sitting in a high-backed booth in the back, a man in his late 60s with eyes that had seen everything and forgiven nothing. He did not get up. "Miss Vance," he said, gesturing to the seat opposite, "my assistant says you have a problem for me. I have a solution. Mr. Holt," I said. I did not order a drink. I placed a bound 20-page portfolio on the table between us. "I am here on behalf of my firm, as a risk analyst. What you are about to see is a confidential audit of one of your senior employees, Marcus Vance. I did not mention our marriage. I did not mention the affair, the church, or Seraphina. I simply walked him through the data. I showed him the timeline of the embezzlement, the creation of the Croft Reconstruction Fund, the awarding of the fraudulent subcontracts to Julian Croft. I showed him the money trail, from his accounts, to Julian, to the fund, and back to Marcus." His face remained impassive, but his jaw tightened. He was a man who hated being stolen from. "This is a significant sum," he said, his voice a low growl. "It is," I agreed, "but it is not the primary liability." I slid a single sheet of paper across the table, the printout of the decrypted email. "The primary liability," I said, "is that your employee is actively conspiring to murder 2 people, his blackmailer and myself, to cover his tracks. He also appears to be bribing a city council member." Holt read the email. He read it twice. He did not get angry about the money. He got quiet, which was far more terrifying. He looked up at me, his eyes like polished stone. He was not a man of God. He was a man of power, and Marcus had violated the 2 core tenets of that power: loyalty and order. "He brought a threat of violence into my house," Holt said, as if to himself. "He put my company's name next to a city council bribe. He is sloppy, and he is finished." "He is," I agreed. "But how he finishes is the question. We can turn him over to the police, but this is a complex financial case. He, Seraphina, and Julian will scatter. They will destroy evidence. The councilman will deny everything. It will be a public mess that will drag Holt Development through the mud for years. What do you propose, Miss Vance? I propose we give them what they want, I said. They are all driven by greed. They all want one last payout. Let us give them the opportunity to get it. All at the same time. All in one place. I laid out the plan. We schedule an emergency budget meeting at Holt Corporate Headquarters. Friday night, after hours. You will call Marcus and tell him your auditors have flagged the overruns on the Gulch project, and you need him to fix it before the board sees it Monday. Tell him to bring his subcontractor, Julian, to justify the costs. Tell him you are prepared to write a check to settle the account if the paperwork is in order. Julian will come for his money. Holt nodded. Marcus will come to manage his blackmailer. I added, and you will call Serafina. You will tell her I have contested the divorce settlement, and you want her there, as a character witness for Marcus, to sign a reconciliation agreement that protects him. She will come to secure her future. And I will call you, I finished, to be there to sign the final divorce papers, releasing all claims. It is the signing Marcus is waiting for before he enacts his plan. We will have all three of them in your boardroom, I said. Greed, fear, and arrogance, all in one room, and we will have witnesses. Holt stared at me for a long time. A slow, thin smile spread across his face. It was not a kind smile. This is excellent, Miss Vance, he said. You have done your homework. In fact, you have done more than you know. He leaned forward. Saul, that city councilman they are bribing, the one on the ledger. Yes, he is my brother-in-law, Holt said, his voice dropping to a whisper. A man I have personally despised for 20 years. We have been watching him, waiting for him to make a mistake big enough to cut him out. Your husband just gave me the tool to clean both my stables at once. Friday night, 8 p.m. The top floor of the Holt Development Tower was dark, save for the boardroom. It was a glass box suspended in the sky, overlooking the glittering, indifferent lights of the Nashville skyline. Arthur Holt sat at the head of the massive, polished granite table. I stood by the 80-inch presentation screen, my laptop connected. The room was silent, humming with air conditioning and anticipation. In the adjacent conference room, a Nashville PD detective and an agent from the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit watched a live feed from a camera hidden in the smoke detector. They had been very interested in the city councilman. At 8:01, Julian Croft arrived. He swaggered in, dressed in an ill-fitting suit, reeking of cheap cologne and arrogance. He was ready for his final shakedown. Mr. Holt, he said, extending a hand. Holt ignored it. Have a seat, Mr. Croft. We are just waiting for the banker. Julian's smile faltered, but he sat, drumming his thick fingers on the granite. At 8:05, Serafina entered. She was in her element, playing the concerned, supportive partner. She wore a modest navy blue dress, her face a mask of anxious piety. She looked worried, but hopeful. When she saw me standing by the screen, she gave me a subtle, conspiratorial nod. She thought I was her ally. She thought this was all part of our plan. I gave her nothing back. At 8:10, Marcus burst in. He was already agitated, his tie loosened. He had clearly been promised a different meeting. He stopped dead when he saw the three of us. His eyes darted from Julian to Serafina, to me, and finally to Arthur Holt. The color drained from his face. He knew. What is this? He demanded, his voice tight. What are they doing here? Holt stood up, walked to the door, and pressed the electronic lock. A heavy, definitive thunk echoed in the room. This, Holt said, his voice a low, cold rumble, is an audit. Marcus. Marcus and Julian both flinched. Serafina just looked confused. I do not understand, Marcus stammered, trying to regain his footing. Arthur, this is a misunderstanding. I can explain the overages. No, I said, my voice cutting through the tension. The 80-inch screen behind me flickered to life. You cannot. But this can. It was not a presentation. It was not a spreadsheet. It was the first scanned page of Julian's handwritten ledger. Julian leaped from his chair. "Where did you get that? That is private property." Marcus just stared, his mouth open, his skin turning a sickly gray. I clicked to the next page, and the next, a cascade of dates, figures, and kickbacks. The name of the city councilman circled in red. It details $840,000 in skimmed profits over 18 months. "Mr. Holt," I said, my voice as calm as if I were reporting the weather. "All directly traceable." Marcus's face collapsed. Julian was hyperventilating. But Serafina began to cry. It was a masterful performance. Soft, heartbroken sobs. She looked at Arthur Holt, her eyes wide and overflowing with tears. "Mr. Holt," she whispered, "I had no idea. I thought this was just a simple charity. Marcus, how could you? I do not know anything about this money." She was good. She was building her alibi, distancing herself, preparing to walk away as the innocent victim, the duped woman of God. I let her cry for exactly 10 seconds. Then I clicked to the next slide. It was the email, the one from Marcus to her. The text was huge, undeniable on the massive screen. "Julian is getting too greedy. After E signs the papers on Friday, we'll handle them both. The brake line accident seems most effective for both. It worked once." Serafina stopped crying. It was as if a switch had been thrown. The tears vanished. Her face, still wet, contorted into a mask of pure reptilian shock. She did not look at me. She did not look at Holt. She turned, slowly, to Marcus. He was shaking his head, trying to form words. "No, Serafina. That is not, I did not mean." Her voice, when it came, was not a whisper. It was a raw, guttural scream that shattered the boardroom's polite silence. "You were going to kill me." She launched herself at him, her manicured nails aimed at his face. "You were going to kill me, you bastard." Marcus recoiled, pushing her back. "It was your idea to get rid of Julian." "Not me," Serafina shrieked. "You were going to kill me too." Julian, finally understanding the email, roared and lunged, not at Serafina, but at Marcus. "You were going to cut me out. You were going to kill me, you son of a bitch." The three of them collapsed into a chaotic, screaming pile, a tangle of limbs and accusations. "You set me up," Julian bellowed. "You were blackmailing me," Marcus yelled back, shoving him. "You were both using me." Serafina screamed at them, her voice cracking with a hatred so pure it was almost beautiful. Holt and I just stood back. We watched the concert of collapse. They were doing our work for us. Every word was an admission. Every scream was a confession. They were so consumed by their own circular, parasitic betrayals that they did not even notice. Arthur Holt gave a sharp, single nod to the door. The heavy doors slid open. The sound was almost silent, but the sudden change in the light, the appearance of dark uniforms, stopped the scuffle instantly. 2 Nashville police officers and the FBI agent in his sharp suit stepped inside, filling the space with an authority that was cold, absolute, and final. The room, which seconds before had been filled with shrieks, was now utterly silent, broken only by the low squawk of a police radio. "Marcus Vance," the FBI agent said, his voice devoid of any emotion. "You are under arrest for federal wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit murder." One officer moved to Marcus, who had crumpled against the table, and pulled his hands behind his back. The click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound I had ever heard. "Julian Croft," the second officer said, moving to the larger man, who seemed to have shrunk. "You are under arrest for extortion and conspiracy." "Serafina Croft," the agent said, gesturing. The first officer, finished with Marcus, moved to her. She was frozen, her face pale. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud and conspiracy to commit murder." The reality finally landed. This was not a negotiation. It was not a church meeting. It was a judgment. As the officer cuffed Serafina's thin wrists, the shock on her face curdled, melting into one last, desperate attempt at a victory. She twisted, her eyes locking on mine. They were filled with a pure, acidic venom. "You still do not win," she shrieked, her voice echoing off the glass. "You do not. He never loved you. You were just a convenience. He loved me. He chose me." The officers began to lead her out. I held up a hand, a silent request for one moment. They stopped. I walked across the room. My heels measured clicks on the granite floor. I stopped an inch from her. Her expensive dress was rumpled, her hair a mess. She was breathing in short, shallow gasps. I reached out, slowly, and straightened the collar of her dress, smoothing the fabric on her shoulder where Marcus had pushed her. It was an intimate, almost gentle gesture. She flinched, as if I had struck her. I leaned in, my voice a whisper that was meant only for her. "You are absolutely right," I said. "He chose you, and now he gets to spend the next 20, maybe 30 years of his life in a federal prison, thinking about that choice. Every single day." I looked her directly in the eyes. "I, on the other hand, chose my company." I stepped back. "Take them away." The FBI agent paused as they were led out. "We arrested the city councilman at his home 20 minutes ago. Ms. Vance," he said. "He is already singing. Thank you for your cooperation. You just cleaned up a significant mess." "I was just assessing the risk." "Agent," I replied. I watched them go. Julian, defeated. Serafina, finally, truly, silently weeping. Marcus was the last one. He paused at the door, cuffed, and looked back at me. There was no apology in his eyes, no remorse, just a bottomless, fiery hatred. He knew, in that final moment, exactly who had beaten him. I held his gaze, my face a perfect blank, until the officer pushed him through the door. The boardroom was quiet. Arthur Holt let out a long, slow breath. He walked to the window, placing his hands on the glass, looking down at the city he owned. "You just saved my company, young lady," he said, his voice a low growl. "You saved my family's name. You are wasted analyzing data for other people." He turned to face me, his eyes sharp. "When this mess is properly buried, I want to talk to you about running our new internal risk management division, global operations. You write your own terms." I looked past him, out the window. The lights of Nashville glittered like a field of scattered diamonds. I was not the woman who had walked into Redemption Hill, humiliated, 5 days ago. I did not need to run. I did not need a new life. I had just taken ownership of this one. I turned back to him, picking up my untouched glass of water from the table. I took a small sip. "Let's talk terms now, Arthur. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I am dying to know where you are all listening from. Please comment below and let me know, and share your thoughts on this entire situation. Make sure to subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories and like this video, and if you really want to support the channel, please hit that hype button so this story can be heard by more people.